Greetings and salutations to our fine podcast audience.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. How's everybody today?
I'm just like I was on the previous podcast. Because
just-
we're recording at the same time.
Ed just blew it. He blew our cover, man.
Exactly like I was.
We had a conversation at one point of, will we tell people we filmed these early? And Ed goes, I don't know why we'd ever bring it up.
And it's the first thing he said.
I just think you don't even need to mention it. Why would you say anything about it?
Ed.
You all know that when something's in my head, I can't really contain it.
We know that. Yes, we
There
do.
we go.
All right. So here we are. We have crossed over into the new year. I was wondering, did you guys make any New Year's resolutions? And if so, how's that going for you?
I did not make any resolutions this year. I am still working on last year's.
I was going to say the exact
I
same
have some
thing.
things that I put in place last year that I actually did gain ground on, but I don't feel like I should let them go yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if they're going to be true habits,
That's right.
wouldn't you want to not
That's
let
right.
them go? So.
I'm always starting random new habits. And so my wife gets annoyed whenever I come home and say, you know what, we're doing this now. She very famously one time, she likes to bring it up a lot. I came into the kitchen and I just said, I've been thinking lately and she just interrupted me and goes, are we starting to make our own shoes now? Because every time it's some kind of new random thing I've decided.
Nathan the cobbler.
That's what I said. I said maybe I can start sewing my own pants.
man.
But one thing I am interested in trying this year is I want to learn Spanish. One of my daughters is of Latin American heritage, and she's really wanting to connect to that culture now and that part of her life. And so I agreed with her that we would try and learn Spanish together.
That was one of mine one last year. So I have been doing Spanish, and I use a particular app that, like all good apps, has streaks in it. So we're, wanting to keep every day going learning. I'm on a 95-day streak right now.
There you go.
Well, good. And I will say, excuse me, for this, the whole habits thing, building habits, we talked about this last January 2020, when we did the series Best Year Ever.
Yeah, exactly.
For 2020. That whole kind of jokes for that you can hold on to. But to go back to that, we talked about some of the things that actually help us create habits, and I can say for sure that the things that I did apply from that study and that book we read, Atomic Habits, are pretty well holding on for me.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
It really has worked for me.
Yep, me too.
That whole thing of making things obvious and making things easier to do and do them at the same time every day, all of those principles that we learned back in January have held for me.
Yeah, I would really encourage people to read that book, even if you're good at, even if you're also going to start sewing your own pants and you'd like new habits.
You will get better at it if you read that book.
I'll say it gives language around a lot of stuff that maybe you already do or you've thought of doing, and it gives you ways. I really do think putting language around things is so helpful because it gives you ways to be able to categorize it in your brain, like you said, of making it obvious, making it repeatable, those kind of things. Even that thing they talk about of habit stacking, of you do this already all the time, just add this to the end of it, and all of that kind of stuff. So if you need a New Year's resolution, you don't even know what to do, that book's a really good one.
Yeah, that habit stacking thing. I now have my morning ritual, which I always had a morning ritual. My morning ritual has way more steps now because I have continued to add a little bit of stack to it. And it's really been helpful. I mean, super helpful.
Awesome. All right. On to the questions. Now, I teased some of these questions last week, which was not last week, Ed. Thanks for bringing that up.
A while back.
So far away in the past. But I did tease these and told you last week that we were going to answer them this week. So we're going to get to those two, and I have actually a third one that I've thrown in there.
We should remind people how they can give us questions.
Give us
we
questions.
want more questions.
There is a link in the description to this videos or podcast, however you're consuming this right now.
Yeah.
You click that link, you send us a question, and it is anonymous. We will never know who you are unless you tell us. So
and sometimes you
we
can tell
do
us.
guess,
we try.
but we don't know who's watching. So
We do not.
you all have all those fake names out on YouTube. We can't tell who.
That's
you are.
right. We know a few of our
We
regulars.
Do. We do
Yeah,
know. We
they
know
tell
several
us.
of our loyal listeners.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
We're
we
super fans.
super fans.
I only know of 2 of those.
Are they super fans? They're not just regular fans. They're super fans.
I like them a lot.
They're super to you.
All right. So here we go. First question came to us very straightforward, but I think we're going to have to probably do some defining for people on this question. They want to know, is Community Christian Church an evangelical church?
Mm-hmm.
So, in the interest of definition,
Clarity and all of that, so that you all know why we're saying what we say.
Yes. Evangelical, that word, it gets thrown around a lot. Let's just
and currently I would say, it's been around my whole life. There's been the phrase evangelical.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably, I'm going to guess it's 80 years old. Does it say on this thing you're looking at?
It doesn't. It's
mid-20th century.
Yes.
Is a mid-20th century creation. I'm going to say around the 40s or 30s, 40s in that area.
The way that it is used. I mean, it is an old word because it comes from a Greek word.
Sure. It does. Yeah, the evangel, which means gospel.
Good news. Yep.
The good news. But it is currently, in my opinion, most people use it as a political word.
Yes.
Yeah, it has a political affiliation. And
so if you want to know, are we politically evangelical? No. But that's not what the word means.
Yeah,
Correct.
And according to this site, which is the National Association of Evangelicals,
they should know.
Well, or at least they think they know.
Yes.
They put some tags on it, and here are just a couple of them. They say these are basically the characteristics of an evangelical would be somebody who believes that lives need to be transformed through a born-again experience and a lifelong process of following Jesus. So
check.
I think
we are
check
that
off. The expression and the demonstration of the gospel in missionary and social reform efforts.
Check.
We would check that one. A high regard for and obedience to the Bible as the ultimate authority.
By what they mean,
yes.
I would say yes, but maybe I'd alter the words a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little. Now, explain that so that we don't get confused. We do believe the Bible.
We believe the Bible it contains the Word of God.
Yes.
And that it is inspired in the originals.
Yes.
And to lead us ultimately to the ultimate authority,
yes.
which is
Jesus.
Which is Jesus. The Bible.
So I guess the distinction we want to make is our allegiance is not to a book.
We do not have allegiance to a book. We have allegiance to a person who is our ultimate authority.
Who is our authority.
I pledge my life to Jesus, not to the Bible.
Yes.
I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, I know that feels like splitting hairs to people. It's an important hair for me to split.
Yeah, I think it's an important one because one of the biggest criticisms often thrown at Christians is the fact that people have used the Bible to justify horrible things because, and I know we hit on this a lot, but if you just see the Bible as a collection of just truths or things like that, I can take little parts out of context or out of the grand concept of leading me to Jesus and say, well, then I should do this or I should do that, and those things I'm doing may not look anything like Jesus.
Well, and when you place your allegiance in the book, oftentimes that opens the door for the misuse of it.
Right.
Many times, because and you've seen this. I've seen this happen my whole life. People will say, "Well, it's because it's in the Bible and I believe it." Well, the way you just said it,
you said the words the Bible said, but the way you were using them is not what the Bible meant.
Exactly. Right. That was not the intended. And so let's filter that through Jesus first before we go and just stand on the Scriptures alone. So, and then the last characteristic of evangelicalism is a stress on the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross as making possible the redemption of humanity.
Yes.
Check. Yes.
Check.
On that one. So
I'm going to say we'd make the cut.
In that way, yes. But back to your original comment, Ed, I think it's important to say if by that word someone is trying to pigeonhole us into a political party or platform, then no.
Either to run toward us as political or to run away from us political.
Yes.
We don't fit in those categories.
Well, and I would also just hesitate. I think, as we just proven, we agree with those tenets of what it means to be evangelical, but I also just hesitate when anyone says, are you this? Are you that? Because labels don't often help anything other than divide us. And I'm certainly to say I'm a Christian in that I follow Jesus is a label and divides me against someone who doesn't follow Jesus in that distinction. But we know, and this is something that's very big for us as a church these days, and we talk about a lot, is unity among Christians. this division would set me apart from non-evangelical Christians, which we don't want to do.
I am not opposed to those Christians either.
Right,
Yeah.
and we believe that is a distinction too among of this when we make the splitting hair of Bible and Jesus. When we say Jesus and our understanding of Jesus as, and you mentioned this on the last podcast, the unique Son of God, right, who brought about the reconciliation between people and God through his death on the cross and his resurrection. Anyone who is with me on that, we are family. We're brothers and sisters. We're on the same team no matter what label they have. But there are so many Christians that based on I know this seems silly, but even based on my translation of the book that I choose, we have to divide. Based on my understanding of certain passages in this book, we have to divide. And so on the question, if you're just wanting to clarify as far as like those tenets, do we agree with those tenets we just listed? I think that's it. But I would encourage whoever asked this not to focus too much on the label, especially also in regards to things that we're talking about of the politicalization. That doesn't sound like a word, but
whatever.
Politicization. I don't know what that word is.
I like what you said.
I feel like I'm having a stroke here. All right, but yes.
But I would also say it. And if whoever asked the question, if they were to walk up to me and ask this question, I probably wouldn't. You probably wouldn't like my answer because I would ask you a question. I would say, well, I need to know what you mean by that, and I find that's important for almost anything regarding are you this or are you that, because you never know whoever's asking the question exactly what they mean by those words, and so it's always important. And I do this, and this is not a tactic. It's not being evasive. I just really want to be clear. And so almost anytime someone asks me a question of that nature, I always come back with, well, I need you to help me understand what you mean. So tell me what those words mean to you.
What are you seeking clarity on?
That's right. And so what I'm really wanting to do, and I think it's important to do, is start a conversation about why is this important to you, and what are you trying to find out about me, and all that kind of stuff, because I think that's much more godly, helpful, Jesus-centered kind of conversation.
And that's just honoring in any environment. I know we've talked about that before, but that thing, if someone comes to me with a question, especially if it feels like it's a loaded question, maybe. I just mean even if it's one that I just don't, because I don't even have that as a pastor. I have that as a person. People just come to me and want to know, about certain things in my life. That the most honoring thing I can do is to not assume I know what your agenda is. So I'm going to craft my answer to make sure not only I answer truthfully, but I get it what you do. But the honoring thing is to say, okay, why are you asking me that? Or what do you want to know? Or, asking for clarity. It's just an honorable way to communicate. Even like when my wife comes and goes, hey, why aren't the dishes done? You know what I mean? Instead of assuming, well, I know why she's saying that. Go, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Were you wanting me to, you know what I mean? Like asking a question honors her.
What do you mean by dishes?
Define clean. I've had that conversation. Like, what do you mean by clean?
Clean
because
is relative in my house.
Those are clean.
In my book.
It depends on what
the
the
discussion
definition
in my house is, did you put those in the dishwasher? There are two of us in the house. If you didn't put it in the dishwasher, then yes, I did.
Depends on what you
I know what you're about to tell me is I did something wrong.
You did it wrong.
Just go ahead and tell
That's
me
the assumption you've made, though.
No, it's 100% the case.
Depends on what
So
your
far.
definition of the word is.
Oh, okay. We're going to go there now. All right.
That's an old political
It
joke.
is.
There you go.
It's a
See,
really
we're going
old
at
political
everybody.
joke.
Were you alive then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
was
As a
little.
very, very young man.
Young man. Okay. All right. So, second question. Equally as controversial, I think, sometimes, depending on how it's asked. This person wants to know, is hell real or is it figurative? And they say, I'm specifically asking about the way that it is described in the Bible, burning fire, brimstone, and the like. So they want to know, is hell real or is it figurative? Now, we sort of talked about this before we hit record.
And we joked and said the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. So let's unpack that for a minute when we say, yes, it's real and yes, it's figurative. What do we mean by that?
I think it's the difference in the definition because, and this, I know this once again sounds like splitting hairs, is the difference between the definition of real or literal, because the way that I now hearing the whole question, it sounds like the question is actually, is the description of hell in the Bible literal or figurative, but the question was, is it real or figurative? It's possible for something to be real, but not the way someone talks about it be literal, right? And I'll just use hell in this thing. I could say when someone says, oh, you went to Alabama, and I said, yes, that place is like hell on earth. I don't literally mean it's like hell on earth, but you've been to Alabama.
But you do.
Yeah. But
You are correct.
right, no, there's a difference between something. Alabama is a real place, and it's a bad place. I'm just joking. It's real.
We love everyone in Alabama.
That's right.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think when you're
You
asking,
can leave.
That's right.
yes,
You are not captive.
we can help you.
That's right.
But yeah, so I think it's important to understand. And certain things in the Bible are that way. I hear a lot of people say, because I believe the Bible has real truth, and there are a lot of, go back to our conversation just now about the Bible versus Jesus being the ultimate authority. A lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are people who believe the Bible is the ultimate authority that believe because that's the case, everything that's real truth has to be literal truth.
Yeah,
it has
right.
to be taken word for word the way it's meant to be. Well, it's possible that someone is describing a real thing, maybe a real event, or just a real truth about God or life, but they're doing so in figurative
Well,
ways.
if I take, for instance, I want to describe something that really is a real thing. As a 61-year-old, I want to explain that to my 4-year-old granddaughter. She does not yet have the language for me to do anything but to describe it in language that she does have. So that when she grows up and she goes, my grandpa said it was like this, and she realizes, one, either my grandpa didn't know what he was talking about because he
Right.
described it in a way that when I really know what it is, it ain't that. Or she, you know what I'm saying? She either has to discount me or she has to come to the fuller understanding, oh, he was using figures of
Right.
speech to describe something that I wouldn't have understood if he had used the exact right words to
Right.
describe it. And it's very possible that a spiritual place or a place that is currently we don't know much about,
A state
Right.
of
a
existence.
state of existence that we don't know much about, that the only way for the person who knew what it was like, which I think is the only person that talks about it. In Revelation,
I was
it's
gonna say,
described,
Revelation,
but
but-
it's Jesus
Yeah.
Yeah.
that is revealing it.
Yep.
Or when he was on the planet, he's using language for us that may be all he had at his disposal because we wouldn't have understood it any other way.
And just to bring this point out, Jesus, we know the images that Jesus did use to describe hell was a literal place in
Oh, yeah.
Jerusalem.
Yeah, the name he used
Yeah.
was definitely a
right.
literal garbage dump.
That's right. Where garbage would smolder and burn
Forever.
Well,
in their view.
And
There
that
be-
hundreds of years before was a place of child sacrifice and was
Yes.
of despicable kinds of
That's
evil.
exactly
and
right.
so
Yes.
he's drawing on contexts that they would have had to describe the kind of existence that will exist. That
No good Jewish person would ever have wanted to go to Gehenna because
or
it
to
had-
live in
Gehenna
Gehenna.
Yeah.
because it was a terrible place that
It is a
had had such-
God-forsaken place.
It was
Right.
a God-forsaken place. And so he's letting them know that with language, whether or not he is describing what the future holds for people who decide to be
God-forsaken.
God-forsaken
Yes.
by their own choice.
By their own choice.
I don't know or not.
Well, and I think what Jesus is trying to describe is
I doubt it personally.
you doubt what part?
I doubt
That he was
his-
trying to be literal.
I think it's
Oh, that he
figures
was
of
being literal.
speech.
Yes.
I don't know, and what he describes is bad.
yeah,
I mean,
no,
it's
yeah,
really
sure,
bad.
Yeah.
But
Well, and
I
isn't
don't
it-
know that it has to be literal.
And I don't understand why that. And I know a lot of Christians who will sort of shy back from that, what you just said. And I don't see the problem with it as much because, as you said, the book of Revelation also uses those images of fire and brimstone and
Yeah.
burning and all of those things. But let's be fair, that is also the same book that describes Jesus in ways that nobody takes literally.
No.
That Jesus is coming with a sword sticking out of his mouth.
And blood dripping off
Blood
his
dripping
robes.
off a robe. Nobody believes that that's how Jesus is going to look when he returns. And yet
Well,
we don't have a.
well,
Okay, sorry.
yeah,
I can't say nobody.
Unfortunately, I know some that do.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but you get my point.
Most people
Most
who know
people.
the Bible don't take it that way.
And so I don't. And again, we could both be wrong,
Right.
on saying that. There may be a literal fire, and that's why Jesus said that. I find it a little bit of a stretch because of those other things.
And don't you think, because once again, these questions are kind of hard to answer facelessly.
Yeah.
I mean, we appreciate you sending the question, but once again, in the aspect of trying to be honoring, the question I would ask someone, which I do regularly when I was teaching students on a week-to-week basis, this question comes up a lot, because especially in most youth, I'll say our youth group's actually pretty unique, I think, at least I should say when I was doing it week to week, of how little we talked about hell.
Now those other people.
No, I just mean
No, I'm just kidding.
in how little we talk, because many of the students who came, they have lots of questions, particularly about hell and and being scared from hell and being running, and so they'd have questions about these kind of ideas. And the question I would often ask is, why is it important for you to understand what existence in hell is? Because there's one possibility, and I had a student who was honest enough to say, it's kind of like a weigh in my options kind of idea, like how bad is bad?
Yeah.
Like how bad? Because I don't want to do all the things that I feel like God would want for me to do, but I don't want that because that's really bad. Or is it this fear, and I have lots of people of a God of love in some kind of eternal torment of people, that being a hard thing to reconcile. And so what I always came to with students was, one, that Jesus is describing a real reality of existence of what life without God forever will be like. That even in this life, even if I don't believe in God, I get glimpses of the beauty of God and the grace of God, and just living in the way the world operates is by grace of God. That there's an existence without all of that because I've chosen that. I've chosen I don't want God. The other side of that is that God is so loving, and that's what I often use with people who have questions about like eternal torment or fire and brimstone, that I believe that the God I see in Jesus is so full of love and so full of grace that he will always do the most loving thing for all people, even if it's hard for me to understand certain things as love. And I think for many of us who want to, as Christian pastors who want to split hairs as far as hell and heaven and who gets in and who doesn't, I think we will be shocked by some of the people that I would have assumed that guy was definitely going to hell.
Or that guy was definitely going to heaven.
Sure. Yeah. Right. That God will be more gracious than we can imagine, because what life has taught me so far is God has already been more gracious than I could have ever imagined.
Right. That's right.
So it's a real, and I like the way Jason said it, state of existence. I don't know if I've used that phrase before, but
I have tried with people before, because I don't like to get caught up in the imagery, because there's not much I can do with it. I can't. I'm okay. I mean, that may very well be literally what it is. Almost always when a person asks me that, it's because they have some doubts, but, you use this example of the student who said, I'm weighing my options. Well, I would say, I've said to people, the one thing I know for sure is God won't be there.
That's right.
Right.
And nothing involved with God. It's been prepared, and it wasn't made for humans, it was made for the devil and those that follow him. So it's a God-forsaken place. I've just said to people, even if you don't want to follow God, you asking me about what God said means that you believe there is a God.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So you, by your question, believe there is one. And that there are things that God does that you do like, even though you might not want to do everything he says. I've said to people, you should probably take time and list out all the things that God is providing for you that you like, and then imagine that
you don't get
those don't exist. Not because you don't deserve them, but because they are a part of what God does.
Yes.
And so whatever hell is, nothing of God will be there.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's good.
And I think when you just say that, then I don't know how that hits people. I really don't. But I would imagine it does not hit quite like an image of horrible, a horrible image that would kind of wake me up to what that really means.
Yeah.
And I think back to what we originally said is when Jesus and the writers of Scripture are using these images, I think that's what they're trying to do, is they're just trying to use what was available to them at the time to, and I don't like the word scare, but it's to jolt the person listening into, trust me, this is not what you want.
Yeah.
What you really want is God.
Yeah.
And I want you to see that. I can't make you. Not even God is going to make you. But trust me, this is not what you want.
Everything in your life that has come to you that you know you nor anyone else created, that is good. Everything. I mean, the
And
world.
even when you say created, that's,
anything around you that you look at and you go, I didn't have anything to do with it, but I love that. I love that I get to ride a motorcycle wherever I want to, and the wind blowing in my face. Well, you didn't create the wind.
That's right.
You didn't create the sun. Any of those things you like. Every time you have to say, I'm thankful for anything.
Yeah.
You admit I didn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the importance of when you talk about Jesus using a real place of Gehenna as his thing, and that this is a place where these atrocities and these evils of child sacrifice, which I think is so... my mind can't really even fathom it.
No.
And I read a lot of like ancient history kind of textbook stuff, and you read about it a lot, but my mind can't fathom, because it's not just, that's a horror. I mean, that by itself, just the fact that exists is a horror. But the place that a person's soul and mind has to get to, that an entire society would not just say, that's okay with us, but that's good and that's helpful for society. That in and of itself, when you talk about God being rude, God is not involved in any of that. And and I think Jesus is pointing to, you've seen in this world where places where God's will is not being done. Yeah. You don't want to be, and no one, no matter how like, they're going to play AC/DC in hell and all my friends are going to be in hell. None of that. The real hell on earth situations are things that for us in America, we mostly read about and we see on news occasionally. And we look at, and you think, what happens to a person that they would do things like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I think that's part of the description of it is it's not just what's happening to me, it's what's happening within me.
All right. I hope that helped.
I'll just say this, and and nobody can be here. Just the whole topic for me, and this hasn't always been true for me. There's a heaviness to all of that is sitting on the three of us right now. I can just feel it.
I almost said the same thing.
That whole idea to me, there's a grief that comes over me to even have to describe it. It feels playful somewhat to people, and I think we use it in threatening ways. I don't think any of it was meant to be that kind of way. It was just, there's a heaviness about that topic.
True. So we'll move on to another one.
Yeah, I do not want anyone to go there.
Can we talk about politics again? Let's go to something lighter. Let's talk about politics.
I don't know. Pretty much the same these days.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
So, all right. Last question, and very straightforward. Person asks, what is considered holy ground today? I'm assuming, again, I have to assume on a lot of these things that they're talking about some references in Scripture where find
somebody said something to them. This is holy ground.
This is holy ground. In fact, I was just listening to a sermon today from one of my favorite preachers, and there was a moment in the sermon where he had someone come up and tell a story. And it was a very heavy, very heartfelt story. And when he walked back up, he said, feels like we're on holy ground right now. And I thought, that's interesting that he said that in that moment. And
I get what he means.
I think I know what he means. So I guess
just thinking, I almost laughed because I can remember walking with, and this is going to be so flippant to some people, but these are the words that got said. When I went on the Fenway Park tour, the tour guide said, this is holy ground for people in New England.
Yeah.
I go, well, and it was really cool. It was really cool. I will say that. I don't know that it was holy ground, but certainly not in the way in the Bible meant it.
Yes.
So holy, let's do holy first.
Let's do holy.
Holy means set apart.
Set apart.
For a specific
For a purpose.
For a purpose.
Yes. it describes God.
Yes.
Well, and
And
in the Bible, when you talk about holy ground, at least the first thing, and maybe there are other cases I can't think of, but the first one you think of is Moses when he encounters God in the form of the burning bush, right? That God says, "Take off your shoes, for this is holy ground." And in particular, going back to what you said of it's set apart, what he's describing is he's not saying there's something extra special about this dirt.
Yeah.
He's saying, I've set this place apart. And by taking off his shoes, and we miss this, is in Middle Eastern or Near Eastern cultures, right? Even to this day, there's something very intimate about feet. In fact, I don't know if I've heard this correct, but that's one of the deals. I don't know why this is in my head, but that was one of the deals in Somalia with like the Black Hawk Down situation that supposedly was one of the things that caused as much anger as it did was the boots. That there's something about showing the bottom of your foot to someone that's offensive in that culture, and that in a lot of areas that's very offensive.
Well, I've seen in some footage of when I think I saw a riot that happened in one of those countries, and they had torn down a statue of a leader that they wanted to overthrow, and they were hitting it with the bottoms of their shoes.
Right.
And it's a sign of disrespect and contempt.
And so what God is saying by saying take off your shoes, he's actually saying I want this to be very intimate.
That's right.
I've set this place aside for us to be close.
And I think when it's used about God, like I think about the vision Isaiah has where the seraphim say, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God of hosts." And what they're just saying with holiness in that meaning has the meaning of set apart but distinct. That God is distinct. He is
none
other.
like him.
He is other than anything else. There's nothing else like him. And so when he says to Moses, I have made this place. Any place God is holy.
Yes.
It is set apart.
It's special.
It is set apart. So when people say it's holy ground, they mean that God has shown up, I think, most in a colloquial kind of way like your friend was using in a message.
Exactly.
That means God has shown up in a unique kind of way at this place. I would say I think one of you guys said this in a message. I don't think it was me, but if it was me, I like it. Somebody said there are no more holy places, there are only holy people. And I do believe that's the new covenant.
Yes.
Yes.
That what God has done is said, I no longer dwell in buildings or places, I dwell in people.
And I think that's what the symbolism of when Jesus was crucified in the temple, the curtain was torn in two, because there used to be a most holy place within the temple, and people regarded that as a more sacred place than all the other places.
Right.
And that symbolism of saying, look, God is, and it was me that said that, by the way.
Good job.
In a message, it was called God Left the Building. And when the curtain was torn, God is essentially saying.
Oh, that was the series we did last year before COVID. We were in the middle of it when COVID hit.
Were.
That's right.
God has left the building. God does not dwell in places per se. You don't have to go to a building in order to encounter God. God lives within you. Through now what Jesus has done, the Holy Spirit resides in us. And that's what Jesus told his disciples. He says, not only will God be with you, he will be in you. As soon as I send the counselor, he called him the Holy Spirit. So in that sense, and I was going to make that point, is in that sense, every place now is holy.
Well, and that's part of what God's doing even in the holy ground moment. By taking, you're out here with your sheep, you're not expecting to encounter God, because in every culture, in fact, and you'll see this once again as the Bible being a unified story leading to Jesus, it wasn't that at one point God said, I do reside in a building. In fact, they kept saying, hey, let's make, David at one point says, I want to make you a temple. And he's like, dude,
hey man, I'm fine. Leave that alone.
That's right.
And even like him dwelling in a tabernacle, because at one point his presence is seen by a cloud, and it's like this, and then pillar of fire by night, that it's these very environmental nature. God's all around us. He's with us all the time. And they go, can we put you in a tent?
Yeah.
Can we put you in this? Because in their culture, that's where God's resided. God's resided in temples. And
they were really, and you see that particularly again in the Exodus when it starts, there's a point where God comes down to the mountain.
Yes.
And he's going to speak directly to the people, and the people go, oh, no.
No, sir.
No, we do not want that.
Yeah.
We will stay here. You go up and talk to God.
Well, and all of those things that you described, Nathan, of God's presence, all of those manifestations, if you call them, they were accommodations that God
That's
was
right.
making
Right.
for people.
Yes.
God never was contained. Never
That's
has
right.
been. He was, and everything that he's done, let's just be honest, everything God has done throughout history in the way that he's revealed himself to us is a condescending to us. Making himself known to us is always a lowering and essentially boxing himself into a place.
I was recently reading, and I cannot remember, an old monk book, and the guy was saying that really, if you really want to get the true picture of who God is, the description given in the first 3 chapters is what God had in mind.
Right.
So there was no, God literally was with Adam and Eve every moment. There was no, he created a place which was the earth. The earth was the place for God to meet with man. It was perfectly, and we decided we couldn't handle that. We couldn't handle that. You need to get back to your place.
Right.
You know?
Or we decide we want this to be our place.
We want this to be our place. You go to your place.
Yeah.
And everything since then is God been trying to get us back to that place where he walks with us and he's with us every moment, which he is. It's one of the parts I love that we now say as we enter into worship, that God is always present with you, but you're not always present for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and even though, so everything we've said is the theologically correct version of it. I have certain places in my life that I wouldn't call holy ground, but I think there is a benefit practically as human beings that there are places that we set aside for the purpose.
Yeah.
You know, I know certain people have chairs in their house or things like that, but even I know for a lot of Catholics and Anglicans, their buildings themselves, they design. I certainly have been in certain cathedrals before, and I am moved by the immenseness of the architecture or the way certain things are painted to lead us towards God, that it isn't true that somehow God is more present there than other places.
I am more present for him.
I am more present
Yes.
with God. And so if you want to call it holy ground, like God has ordained the church building is more holy than being with a person. But there is a benefit, and we talked about this with prayer, there's a benefit to some things not being casual and some things being, I've set this as this. I heard one person talk about Sabbathing, that you take certain times, that the way it's described is that it's a cathedral in time, that you have found a way to take time and make it holy, that I am setting it apart for a purpose. And because sometimes we're so casual, and we talked about this when we talked about prayer, I can talk to God anytime. That means we talk to God really no time, or when I'm desperate.
That's right.
Not having a time set aside or having a place. There is a benefit to that. There is a way, like you said, that I become present to God, even though he's always present with me.
All right. That's our questions for today.
All right.
So,
All right?
The next time you see us actually will be another day.
we're done recording today. I'm done.
There
Well,
you
I mean, it'll always be another day for you. I'm sorry for getting into that. It'll be another day for me too.
Ed's trying to confuse you.
I know.
Don't
He's
let him do
confused
it.
me.
Yeah. Now I'm confused. So, all right. So, but we'll be back. We got another set of questions that you guys have
Yay.
asked us. I don't know what they are. I'll leave you in
Jason
suspense.
will let us know.
You'll be
Yeah.
in suspense. So, see you next week.
Bye-bye.